Barakada Yahweh, Barakada Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Barakahak Wadash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who ruled and teach well. And peace and salutations to you, sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video, and I'm going to start it off in the book of Obadiah, chapter 1, verse 1, and the header reads, Edom will be humbled, and the biblical Edomites today are known as these so-called white people, these Americans, British, Europeans, Russians, South Afrikaners, the 1948ers over in the Holy Land right now, etc., etc. This whole chapter is dedicated to the punishment and downfall and ultimate ending of your nation. The vision of Obadiah, thus saith the Lord Yahweh concerning Edom. We have heard a rumor from Yahweh, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen, that ambassador being the men of the Lord, the prophets of the Most High, chiefly through GMS or Great Millstone, as well as the brothers coming in the spirit of GMS, going out into the highways and byways preaching this word, as well as putting out video epistles like this, showing who the biblical Edomites are according to the scriptures and what your fate's going to be. And with us pushing out that vibration, these other nations across the planet are picking up on that vibration and seeing that you Edomites, especially in the so-called Western world, are the root cause of the problems taking place on this planet. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. Verse 2, Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen. Thou art greatly despised. And this has a twofold meaning. On the one hand, you Edomites are the smallest nation of people, the true global minority on the planet. And on the other hand, your reputation is being made small amongst these different nations. Like I just said, these other nations see that you're the root cause of the problems on the planet right now, especially you Edomites in the Western world, Western Europe, and especially the United States of America, which is the puppet master to those Western European nations, that whore that rides upon the beast in Revelation chapter 17. And this is going to bring me into an article on AOL.com titled, A New World Order. Brics just agreed to welcome Saudi Arabia, which is one of the top allies of the U.S., Iran, Ethiopia, Egypt, Argentina, and the United Arab Emirates. Why that's not exactly good news for the U.S. And hey, with the formation of the Brics, a lot of these nations that have had to, feel the brunt from the West, especially the United States of America, towards them when they didn't want to follow along with their dictates, are seeing an alternative with these Eastern Brics nations. So they're getting more confident in bucking up to the U.S. in the West and, not scared of their sanctions or military reprisals, because they know that they finally have an ally that will back them up and protect them in nations like Russia, China, you name it. Again, I have made thee small amongst the heathens, thou art greatly despised. The Brics bloc has agreed to admit Saudi Arabia, Iran, Ethiopia, Egypt, Argentina, and the United Arab Emirates, UAE, to its ranks, adding fuel to the fire of a new world order, according to Russian President Vladimir Putin. The 6 new candidates will formally become Brics members alongside Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa on January 1st, 2024, as reported by Reuters. And hey, that's a big blow to the West, especially the U.S., with nations like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, about to become a part of the Brics. Because if you know about that relationship between Saudi Arabia and the United States, it's Saudi Arabia selling their oil exclusively in the US dollar, known as the petrodollar, which has been a major factor in keeping up the strength of the US as the global reserve currency. And any falter to that, could easily bring this house of cards based off the US dollar come tumbling down. The US can't afford that right now, especially with them being crippled by trillions of dollars in debt and inflation, which is going to lead to hyperinflation. The US is on the verge of an economic collapse, which will take place. We're living in the twilight hours of the United States of America being the sole superpower, and really these Edomites as a whole being in their rulership. This membership expansion is historic, said Chinese President Xi Jinping at the 15th Brics Summit in Johannesburg. And down there in South Africa, a lot of those Hamites or so-called Africans are turning up against you South African Edomites down there. Esau is on the back foot globally because, again, we're living in the end of this age of your rulership before you go down and go into 1,000 years of hardcore bondage and slavery under the true children of Israel, which are known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today. It shows the determination of Brics countries for unity and cooperation with the broader developing countries. A common desire among multiple bloc members is to level a global economic playing field they feel is over-reliant on, ding, 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 the US dollar. The 6 new members to the bloc add an interesting dynamic to Brics. Most are allies or close trading partners with current members. For instance, the UAE, United Arab Emirates, has signed a bilateral trading agreement with India that will see the two countries trade oil and other assets in their local currencies, not the US dollar. And the United Arab Emirates has ties with the US, and the US and India, are allies to an extent. The U.S. has been constantly courting India to serve as, the forefront of a Indo-Pacific NATO in that region to try to create a front to fight against China. But as we can see, India is interested in moving more east instead of west with the Brics. Fellow oil power Saudi Arabia is also looking to loosen the grip of the U.S. on the global energy industry. Meanwhile, Brazil has long called for its neighbor Argentina's inclusion. Egypt has close commercial connections with Russia and India, and Iran shares Russia's issues with U.S.-led sanctions and diplomatic isolation. And also, with this war in Ukraine, that exposed a lot of the strength that the West, especially the U.S., has in weaponizing the U.S. dollar against nations that they're going against, like with Russia. They isolated Russia with sanctions and blocking them from using the SWIFT and trade in the U.S. dollar to try to punish them for their special military operation in Ukraine. And a lot of these nations don't want to get caught in that same boat, to where if they do anything that bucks up against the Western powers, they get crippled through being cut out from SWIFT, access to the U.S. dollar, or sanctions. So that's pushing them towards that alternative in the East, the Brics, skirting a Western sanctions, that U.S. dollar, and the SWIFT as a whole. According to South African officials, more than 40 countries have expressed interest in joining the bloc. Upon announcement, the 6 new members, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa hinted at further expansion, saying, "We have consensus on the first phase of this expansion process, and other phases will follow." So with this article, you get the point. But as we can clearly see, there's a change in the air. A lot of these nations, again, are seeing that you Edomites, especially in the Western world, are the root cause of all the issues that they're dealing with. So they're looking for alternatives, moving towards the east. And however it plays out, mainly through the Brics, through other means, whatever, this Western system dominated by the Edomites will collapse, as well as these Edomites' hold on the planet in other places, because we're living in the end of the rulership of you Edomites. Well, let's get back to these precepts. Back in Obadiah, chapter 1, I'm going to jump to verse 7. All the men of thy confederacy, or your allies, such as Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, have brought thee to the border. The men that were at peace with thee, Saudi Arabia agreeing to sell their oil in U.S. dollars for U.S. weapons and protection, have deceived thee. Saudi Arabia seeking membership with the Brics, with the U.S.'s top enemies like Russia and China, and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread, receiving all that money and weapons and protection, have laid a wound under thee, planning to break the dominance of the U.S. and that dollar in energy trade and other assets globally. There is none understanding in him. So we showed an example with Saudi Arabia, but now let's show an example with the United Arab Emirates. Because like this article said, they're planning on joining the ranks of Brics. And that's going to, cause a lot of major issues with the U.S. and the state of Israel, because they came up with an agreement, an accord a couple of years ago called the Abraham Accords, which we're going to go into a little bit. And this is the Wikipedia article on the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords are a series of joint normalization agreements initially between Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, effective since September 15th, 2020, mediated by who? The United States. The initial announcement of August 13th, 2020 concerned only Israel and the United Arab Emirates before the announcement of a follow-up agreement between Israel and Bahrain on September 11th, 2020. On September 15th, 2020, the official signing ceremony for the Abraham Accords was hosted by the United States at the White House. As part of the dual agreements, listen to this, both the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain recognized Israel's sovereignty, enabling the establishment of full diplomatic relations. So much for a two-state solution. The Abraham Accords, mediated by the U.S., which involved the United Arab Emirates, was supposed to recognize the state of Israel's, sovereignty, so-called existence. And we know that the United States is the state of Israel's top ally in that so-called Middle Eastern region. And they want to balkanize the Middle East and weaken those nations down there so that the state of Israel would be the sole power in there and nobody could stand up to them. Look up something called the Oded-Yinon Plan, which speaks of such things. And also remember that speech that former General Wesley Clark spoke about 20 years ago, where he said the U.S. was planning on overthrowing, I believe it was 7 countries in 5 years. And that involved Iraq, Sudan, Syria may have been in there as well, but their top nation that they were going to end it off with was Iran. And let's see who some of the signatories were. Bahrain, Israel, which those people over there, like I said, are Edomites as well, Amalekite Edomites, the United Arab Emirates, Sudan, Morocco, The United States as the mediator. The subject, agreement on Arab-Israeli normalization, resolution of the Arab-Israeli conflict. So, hey, a couple of years ago, you had the United Arab Emirates, join the Abraham Accords, which was mediated by the U.S. to recognize Israel's sovereignty. But as we just read in that article, the United Arab Emirates is planning on becoming a member of the Brics, which involves nations like Russia and China, who are top U.S. enemies, and also Iran, which is a top enemy of Israel. So there's major conflicts of interest there. Again, all the men of thy confederacy, or your allies, in this case, the United Arab Emirates, have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee, signing the Abraham Accords to recognize Israeli sovereignty, have deceived thee. Oh, you know what? We're just going to do economic and other lucrative ties with your major enemies in the Brics, and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. So we can clearly see that these Edomites in the West, especially the U.S., are being made small among the heathen and greatly despised. And as it said back up in verse 1, arise ye and let us rise up against her in battle. That's ultimately what this is going to culminate into, with a lot of America's former allies allying themselves with nations like Russia and fighting against the U.S. in the West during the main part of World War III, the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon in Joel chapter 3. And notice whenever you hear about the Brics and a so-called New World system and moving away from the West, Russia is always at the head of it, because Russia is that chief player in prophecy to lead these other nations against the Western world, especially the United States of America. This is Ezekiel chapter 38. I'm going to start at verse 1. And the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, which is the biblical name for Russia, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. And real quick, just because Russia is seeming like a beacon of light to these other nations, they're still Edomites at the end of the day, and they're going down with the rest of their Edomite brothers and sisters. When Yahweh Bahashem Yahushai takes Esau out of his rulership, the Most High is just using these Russian Edomites or Gog right now to fulfill prophecy. They're still just as hated as those Edomites in the United States or in Western Europe or elsewhere, as it just said, and say, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog. Verse 4, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws. And that's the Most High putting that old confrontational Soviet Union spirit back on these Russian Edomites. What did it say back in that article? It's one part I'm looking for in particular, Salakia. Oh, adding fuel to the, I'll just reread it. The Brics bloc has agreed to admit Saudi Arabia, Iran, Ethiopia, Egypt, Argentina, and the United Arab Emirates to its ranks. Hey, the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that are at peace with thee have deceived thee, adding fuel to the fire of a new world system, according to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Hey, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws. Hey, Russia's building up economic ties with these different nations globally, as well as building back up their military presence. They helped Bashar al-Assad win the Syrian civil war against the U.S., Israeli, Western mercenary army ISIS. And they're building up their military presence in places like North and West Africa. You've been seeing what's going on the African continent lately with nations like Burkina Faso, Niger, I believe Mali's in there as well. Hey, pushing out Western forces out of their country, like France, and moving more towards Russia as a new ally to them to sell them weapons and help them out economically. And Russia's building up its military presence in that Arctic Ocean region, nuclear capable. And I will bring thee forth and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, and all of them handling swords. Russia's military might and personnel, tanks, fighter jets, hypersonic missiles, the S-300, the S-400, artillery pieces, you name it, which we're seeing. And they've been begun to be brought forth with their military operation in Ukraine. But what this is ultimately talking about is them being fully brought forth into that Middle Eastern region for the War of Armageddon, the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. Verse 5, Persia, which is an ancient name for Iran, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. The Brics bloc agreed to admit Saudi Arabia, Iran or Persia, Ethiopia. Gomer, which is speaking of Turkey, and all his bands, the house of Togarmah of the North Quarters and all his bands, and many people with thee. And this article may actually mention Turkey somewhere in here. But let's see. It may have been in another article I was reading dealing with this whole BRICS thing, but Turkey, has definitely shown interest in joining the BRICS as well. Yeah, it was probably in another article. Hey, but regardless, though it may seem that Turkey and Russia have friction right now, they still do economic and military deals behind the scenes, and Turkey is ultimately going to betray the West and NATO to fully ally themselves with Russia. Verse 7, Be thou prepared and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company, or thy allies that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. Russia's being a guard unto these other nations economically right now, and they're ultimately going to be a guard unto them militarily. And these nations are going to assemble themselves under Gog or Russia to fight against the U.S., the West, and the state of Israel during the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. Again, an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. As we can clearly see, we are almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites, primarily these Western Edomites, especially in the United States of America. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.